Wearing ease, design ease, and seam allowances. If a garment were to be made to one's exact body measurements, it would be skin tight and there would be no room to walk, sit, or move about. Ease gives every garment a room for movement. The amount of ease incorporated depends on the style of the garment. In addition to ease, we have to include seam allowances to be able to actually sew the cut pieces together and not reduce the body and ease measurements. Seam allowances also provide room to make alterations or adjustments to the garment as needed. At the end of the session, you will be able to explain the importance of adding wearing ease and design ease before drafting patterns for a garment. Explain the importance of adding seam allowances before drafting patterns for a garment. First, let's see the concept of wearing and design ease and the importance of adding it before we draft the pattern for a garment. Wearing and design ease is the difference between the actual body measurements and the finished garment measurements at the same points as measured like bust, waist, and hip circumference. Wearing ease is the minimum amount of extra room added to a garment to allow comfortable, non restricted movement so that you can lift your arms, sit down, or move about. This ease needs to get added to our body measurements before we start drafting. Different types of fabric will affect the amount of ease required. Soft fabric needs less wearing ease, and stiff or thin fabric needs more wearing ease. Inner wear needs less wearing ease as it is supposed to fit closely to the body. Meanwhile, outerwear and jackets will require more fitting ease as it will be covering your body and the clothing underneath combined. Design ease is an extra amount of ease beyond the basic wearing ease that is added to give it a characteristic style. Ease needs to get added to the body measurements before we start drafting. Now let's see why we need to add seam allowances before drafting the pattern for a garment. Seam allowance refers to the area between the stitching line and raw cut edge of the fabric. The amount of seam allowances may differ to curved seams, straight seams, or hems. A seam joins more than one piece of fabric. All layers of fabric joined by a seam must have the same seam allowance. Make sure that the raw edges line up evenly to create an equal seam allowance on all of the pieces being joined. Accurate seam allowances is an important key to having your pattern pieces fit together when sewing and ensure the right fit when wearing. The seam allowance at hems will need extra attention, especially wider hems, because they reach in the garment more. In this session, we have seen the concept and importance of adding wearing ease, design ease, and seam allowances before drafting the pattern for a garment. Before we conclude, let's take a look at the key points. Wearing ease is the minimum amount of extra room added to a garment. Design ease is an extra amount of ease beyond the basic wearing ease that is added to give it a characteristic style. Seam allowance refers to the area between the stitching line and raw cut edge of the fabric. Accurate seam allowances is a key to ensure the right fit. With that, we have come to the end of this session.